a dim-witted boy, a merciless little girl, and the all-powerful personification of death, bound forever in their service. That's right, today we're taking a stab at the good and not so good people of Endsville. I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy, good to evil.
Open your fingers or I open your rib cage.
Now, Billy and Mandy is very much a cartoon of its time. It was, after all, the era of Charlie the Unicorn and gratuitous toilet jokes. It was a time that really celebrated how absurd animation could be. Notably, this series put a black comedy spin on the whole thing and derived most of its laughs from the surreal animation, flippant storytelling, and the gruesome fates often met by the key cast. It has also shown no regard to continuity or character growth, which altogether make the characters somewhat difficult to rank on a good to evil scale. The show introduced us to a myriad of characters, a great deal of whom fall in the darker shades of morally gray. So let's jump right into the shallow end of that pool with the most good, or at least the least evil. Let's get started. But our reigning champ of purity probably needs no introduction, being one of the most well-remembered characters from the franchise. Of course, I'm talking about the incomparable Fred Fredburger. With his stuffed animal cuteness and his oblivious demeanor, Fred embodies good. But how good? As it turns out, pretty darn good. While there's evidence to suggest that Fred Fredburger probably shouldn't ever be in a position of power or on a jury, it's hard to find anything about him to be mad about. He's a sensitive guy with simple pleasures and a positive outlook. For the moments of trouble he does cause, the culprit is really more his low intelligence than any ill intent. In more than one instance, Fred even proves himself to be a strong moral philosopher. Sort of. He has heart. Our runner-up for good has 8 legs and unresolved daddy issues. It's Jeff the Spider, originally hatched by Billy, who has a crippling fear of bugs, and makes that known whenever he sees him. Jeff nonetheless regards Billy as his father and spends the bulk of the series vying for his paternal affection. Instead, though, he's always left to endure the emotional and physical repercussions of Billy's phobia. Despite this, Jeff never lets Billy's abuse get to him and extends an overt, undiscerning friendliness to everyone he meets, but he falls just short of our most good for an interesting reason. He's apparently anatomically incapable of meanness. In one of the earlier episodes, Jeff admits he has an enormously small mean gland. In fact, Jeff seems to be physically unable to act maliciously or even assertively of his own accord. On the rare occasion he does stand up for himself, he does so because he's either being goaded or literally possessed by an outside force. But Jeff at least gets his happy ending as Billy's son in the television special, Wrath of the Spider Queen, at the expense of his happy marriage, and only until the end of the movie. Even on his supposed deathbed, his main concern is simply for the health and safety of his children, showing himself to be a good dad, despite never really getting the knowledge firsthand. Following closely at Jeff's many heels is Puddin', Billy and Mandy's childish, long-suffering classmate. Like Jeff and many other good characters on this list, Puddin' usually exists to be put through the ringer and usually comes out pretty mangled on the other side, be it having his limbs cannibalized by Sperg or duking it out with and losing to a demonic pet bunny. Despite apparently having been raised by wolves though, he's generally portrayed as incredibly innocent and at times too naive to prevent the painful situation that he finds himself in. He ranks lower than Jeff though because Puddin' has actually demonstrated a violent temper and the ability to beat up a trained military combatant once he's been pushed too far. Provided you don't mess with the kid's bunnies though, he's gentle, polite, and helpless enough to be considered a close runner-up for the big good of the series. Harold, Billy's father and who, by consensus, Billy gets his brains from, comes in next. While he implies a dangerously low level of intelligence, he does prove himself a caring, if somewhat ineffective father figure to Billy, and a loving husband to his wife Gladys most of the time. Truthfully, Harold has been a source of tension for the family more than once, such as when he ate his wife's beloved pet, or when he, without remorse, terrorized his son's picnic for no given reason. These faults aside though, he does frequently serve as a mediator in the family, and particularly as a buffer for his wife's more aggressive tendencies. He's definitely the most mellow character on our list, and in a place like Endsville and family like his, that can only be a good thing. Nearly rounding out our good characters, our penultimate entry is Billy's best friend Erwin, a vampire mummy human hybrid and Mandy's faithful undeterred suitor. Now, to Erwin's credit, he would have ranked far lower on this list when he was a baby, if the episode Heartburn is any indication. But as he grew, Erwin apparently had a complete change of heart and opened himself to the goodness in the world, eventually becoming the lovable, if awkward, nerd he is today. To have the luck this guy does, you also have to hand it to him for his optimism. Regardless, there's his unrequited obsession with Mandy to consider, and the lengths he's willing to go to see it fulfilled, particularly abusing his brief power as Pharaoh, or using Grimm's scythe to hypnotize her into going out with him. Erwin's definitely someone who lets love cloud his judgment, but he has proved himself to be a loyal accomplice to the main trio, despite the safety hazards that entails, and for that we commend him. Moving on to our final entry in the good category, we finally come to one of our main characters, Billy. At times, a simple, happy-go-lucky boy, and a menace to society at others. Billy is categorized by excitability, friendliness, impulsivity, and mostly for his impossibly low intelligence. Indeed, we see in one episode that Billy's stupidity is so critical that it underpins the nature of reality, and that messing with it can unravel existence itself. Thus, him having the power to the underworld at his disposal often leads to the wacky and deadly situations that the characters find themselves in. Throughout the series, Billy places the universe in danger countless times, and thanks to his general obliviousness, never learns anything from them. This makes him a real thorn in the side of Grimm, who usually has to clean them up, and Mandy, who consistently gets drawn into the fray. On the other hand though, Billy is easily the most gregarious member of the trio, and generally has good intentions. Despite their treatment of him, he has consistently shown that he cares about them, and between him and Mandy, he's definitely more civil with Grimm. He's also the most likely of his friends to put a positive spin on whatever problem they're facing, and the bravery to face danger, even supernatural danger, head on. He's also responsible for more than a few of their victories over the forces of darkness. Not bad for a guy with an IQ of -5. And with that said, that ends our list of good characters. Let's head on to the gray area. Moving down to our neutral intermediaries, just outside of the good category, is our titular skeleton, the Grim Reaper himself. Despite Grimm's claim to be the master of all evil, contextually, he's one of our tamest characters. Not quite enough to be good and not anywhere near evil as one would expect from someone with his occupation. The straight man psychopump might be considered a perfect neutral. Grimm spends a lot of the earlier episodes bemoaning his circumstances and trying to work some way around his deal with Billy and Mandy, even fantasizing about murdering them more than once. As he settles in, he actually goes to pretty great lengths to keep the kids safe, under the guise of unwillingly upholding his end of the contract, of course. But this guy isn't exactly perfect either. Grimm isn't terribly dedicated to the stipulations of his job, usually due to meddling by Billy and Mandy, but also due to his own choices as well. For example, we know him to have supernaturally extended Jeff's lifetime, solely because doing so meant more terror for Billy. He's also been known to enjoy his job a little too much, to say nothing of the questionable events of his past. Really though, in most cases, he's just a guy in a bad way, and whatever punishment you might dole out on him would pale in comparison to what he has to endure for all eternity. Really, it's a fate worse than death. Next, we have supernatural spectral exterminator Hoss Delgado. Armed with a gruff demeanor and an evil dead-esque right hand, Hoss has been both an ally and an adversary to Grimm and the kids, despite frequently beating the living daylights out of Grimm. The dead daylights? Hoss's first concern is usually his work, or later in the series, keeping up with his girlfriend Eris. Hoss ranks where he does for the role he plays later in the series, as the bringer of perfect concordance to the universe, after he courts Eris, goddess of discord, and his commitment to containing the forces of the underworld, but also for his questionable methodology for dealing with threats, which can be brutal to say the least. Hoss was also willing to take Erwin under his wing for a while, to help him earn Mandy's affection. In that time, he also divulged his origin story. He might rank lower than he does in the opinion of Kyle, his former rival, who he keeps chained to a radiator in a basement somewhere. Billy's fearsome mother, Gladys, comes next. A doting mother with a chip on her shoulder where Grimm is concerned, Gladys has demonstrated a marked hostility to the Reaper since their first meeting. You might not be able to fault her for the initial bad impression, seeing as she spent that whole episode believing she was losing her mind. But the situation really devolves from there. In fact, Gladys is one of the few characters who develops throughout the series in the form of a gradually worsening mental state. By the latter act of the series, she was unhinged completely, frequently flying into fits of rage. Gladys does, however, genuinely love her family very much, and it might not be a stretch to blame the stress she gets put under, as their caretaker is one of the largest contributors to her stress. The series' take on Dracula ranks next. An elderly vampire with a thing for dancing, Dracula can never really be bothered to do anything he doesn't want to do. Being your classic curmudgeonly old geezer, Dracula rarely demonstrates any concern for others and can't really be counted on to spare feelings. He's even been known to eat a mother's babies in front of her and then abandon Grimm to deal with the consequences. Dracula isn't a villain. Whenever he appears, he never has any evil intentions, but it's his general selfishness that can't be overlooked. Not only did he steal his best friend's girl from right under his nose, he's also known to skip out on checks and even once got thrown out of a children's classroom for using a show and tell appearance to flirt with Billy's teacher. Nergal Jr., son of Nergal, comes next. Hatched and reared by two loving parents at the center of the earth, the pint-sized shapeshifter was originally alienated and ridiculed for his grotesque appearance, something that really left a chip on his shoulder that was evident in his debut. In fact, Jr. would be pretty low on our villains list if the series maintained its continuity, having assumed the identity of all Billy and Mandy's popular classmates and leaving them frozen to death in the snow. But Jr. eventually mellows out and even admits that his actions were out of loneliness, something that he works to rectify, to an extent, in his later appearances. He's usually willing to help Billy with whatever scheme he comes up with, solely out of familial loyalty, and generally just seeks the approval of his peers, and you can't really fault the kid, the Spawn, for that. Still, he ranks as our lowest neutral character for the lengths he's willing to go. Now that wraps up the gray area. Let's move on to the real baddies. These are the bad and the evil. Our least evil of the evil is Sperg, the local wedgie enthusiast and frequent schoolyard bully for Billy and Irwin. You can't deny that Sperg is an evil character for the sheer joy he derives from hurting and ridiculing those he puts beneath him, nor can you deny that his evil is likely rooted in his insecurity. But Sperg is a nuanced character, far more so than some of our other contenders. Not only does he have dreams of being on Broadway, he's also a remarkably devoted son to his mother. We've also seen on multiple occasions he's in no hurry to assert dominance if another bully makes a claim to his throne. All that aside, what cements Sperg as our least offensive villain is his overall incompetence at being one. In fact, more often than not, whatever he puts out into the world often comes back and bites him threefold. We scarcely have to mention, for example, how he destroyed Billy's haunted tricycle, only for it to come back from the dead to exact its vengeance. It's a lesson to us all, what you get for bullying kids with death on their side. Moving on, we have Mindy, the stereotypical queen bee of Endsville Middle and foil to Mandy. As the head cheerleader of the school, she distributes her judgment on the other students with an iron fist, but like Sperg, usually pays for her misdeeds through some supernatural means by the end of the episode. Though she's arguably less effective at being a bully than Sperg, we have to give credit where credit's due. Her primary tactic is manipulation, and her usual target is Mandy, who's incredibly difficult to cow in a contest of toughness. Be that as it may, Mindy's able and willing to use others to get what she wants, which we see her do in her first appearance, to none other than Grimm. She even manages to make Mindy insecure enough to challenge her in a beauty pageant, to disastrous results. Having placed the foils for both Billy and Mandy, it seems poetic that our next entry is a recurring antagonist for Grimm, the Boogeyman, or Boogie as he's known more conventionally. A learned doctor of the law and pirate captain, voiced by Fred Willard, Boogie lacks the ability to be scary, but packs more villainous potency than some of his contemporaries. In fact, he serves as the main antagonist for 2 of the 3 specials that the show produced. Many of Boogie's misdeeds are characterized by outright malicious intent, and also long-term, sometimes deadly consequences. In the television movie, Big Boogie Adventure, he testifies against Grimm in Underworld Court and actually manages to cost the Reaper his status and his powers. He spends the rest of the movie on a selfish quest for Har's Hand, a powerful relic through which he could become scary enough to take over the mortal world and reduce it to a wasteland. Later on, in Wrath of the Spider Queen, Boogie serves as a retroactive main antagonist by, as shown through flashbacks, attempting to gain the status of Grim Reaper by rigging the election. Though his plan fails and he's punished spectacularly, this act also makes him responsible for the souring of Grimm's relationship with Velma the Spider Queen, which eventually leads to a full-scale spider invasion, and the vengeful monarch to make her own attempt on Grimm's life. But while he does a lot of damage, Boogie is another who rarely escapes karma for his actions, and that's more than we can say for the next few evildoers. Inching down to the depths of the underworld, we have Eris, goddess of discord, a thinly veiled Madonna parody who had an apple long before it was cool. During her Valley Girl phase, Eris initially appears as Grimm's crush, though she rebukes his affections. She manages to charm Mandy with her penchant for magical mischief, but can't resist the urge to double-cross her, which leads to her own downfall. But this isn't the last we see of her. As the series progresses, Eris is actually able to pull off some tough feats in the name of her craft, namely outsmarting and manipulating the main characters into unleashing terror onto the world and disfiguring themselves into helplessness, all by leaving her magic apple in their care. Eris is a character who always has an ulterior motive, and that motive will always be chaos. She definitely takes pride in her work and can be counted on to show herself as the ringmaster of a bad situation. She also demonstrates herself to be a less than pristine significant other, dominating Haas in their relationship and banishing him to the dimension of puppets whenever he displeases her. When the relationship finally ends, she literally devours him. Eris is our second runner-up for Big Bad for her immense power and her wiles, and also because she knows how to get out of trouble she finds herself in. Just goes to show, hell hath no fury like a chaos goddess scorned. I bet you're thinking you've got our Big Bad pinned. At times, a commanding little girl, and the supreme force of evil in the universe at others. Mandy might just be the most terrifying cartoon child of her time, but is she the most evil character in the show? Well, no, not technically, but the kid's definitely evil, and there's no way around that. Mandy's propensity towards evil and power are evident in her very first appearance, where she manages to cheat death into being her servant, and in every appearance thereafter. She disregards the lives of everyone close to her and regularly gambles with the fate of the world when she sees that it suits her. In fact, Mandy has demonstrated on multiple occasions that she has the potential to conquer the human race with little to no effort, and might actually have if the episode Scary Poppins is to be believed. In fact, when given the opportunity to share reigning over a dark and terrible future alongside someone else, she's been known to undo whatever process brings this scenario about, because a world of darkness is not worth the trouble if she can't rule it alone. Vicious as she might be, she's usually content to simply make Billy and Grimm the target of her ire, working Grimm to the bone as her slave, and taking advantage of Billy's lacking mental faculties to get what she wants. Despite her apparent hatred for all existence though, Mandy has actually been known to show concern for the two of them, and is briefly moved to tears at the prospect of losing Billy forever, leading to the fan theory that something more than just convenience keeps the two together. Much like Billy's dimness, Mandy's dark and surly demeanor is a crucial component of her character and the stability of the universe. In the episode My Fair Mandy, when prompted to smile, the action caused her physical pain and rends the very fabric of reality. We can say without pause that, in universe, Mandy has evil down to a science. So who outranks her here, and why? Our big bad of the series is none other than the very first recurring antagonist, the loser from the center of the earth, Nergal. With great, possibly limitless, demonic power at his disposal and a heaping pile of insecurities on his shoulders, Nergal is characterized pretty early by his need to feel accepted. Pathetic as he is, unlike most other characters like him, his motivations are selfish, but ultimately sympathetic. He's a lonely, awkward creature who's so given to coercion and manipulation that he can't fathom making friends in any other way. In fact, he's actually been seen to envy Grimm's horrible situation because, by his understanding, enslavement is a valid pathway to friendship. But Nergal is a devoted, if incompetent husband and father, and a relatively inoffensive personality. So what constitutes him being our most depraved character? His refusal to claim responsibility for his problems. He feels entitled to the kindness and hospitality of others without contributing to them. This is evident earlier in the series, when he forcefully tries to take Grimm's place as Billy and Mandy's best friend, and in the episode Something Stupid This Way Comes, where, after failing to make friends due to his own cluelessness and immaturity, he simply forces himself onto the entirety of Endsville and the television audience. Consistently, while Eris and Mandy are ultimately crueler, muscular and likely have a higher body count, they and other evil characters own their cruelty. Nergal, by contrast, is an eternal victim. His problems, in his eyes, are due to others' attitudes towards him and never his own fault. Even after he settles down and sires a family of his own, he muscles his way into Billy's house after running out on them because he feels they think he's a failure. Note, not because he's a failure, but because people he respects don't respect him back. Billy and Mandy is a difficult show to categorize based on morals because, by and large, they're lacking in Endsville, but that's what makes the show so great. Let us know below what your opinions are, and make sure to check out our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters from your favorite cartoons, movies, and video games. But most importantly, stay wicked.